being amenable to lengthening our visit together. We will conclude shortly, we hope. I'll recognize myself for an opening of a second round. Attorney General, in the 24 budget request, you say, and I quote, "The United States has experienced a dramatic increase in violent crime incidents, with the number of violent crimes increasing by 29% in 2021. That's an alarming statement, and I'm sure we agree on that. We should be prioritizing targeting violent crime across the country, and yet your budget submission is full of funding for programs that aim to keep criminals on the street as opposed to behind bars. We're seeing unprecedented warfare, if you will, in our major cities across the country, in every region of the country. Violent crime. And we should be tackling the problem face on. But the department, for example, requests $50 million for a new program that would incentivize jurisdictions to empty juvenile detention facilities, close the prisons. Sounds like a follow-up to the defund the police movement. Your December 2022 memorandum, revising the department's charging and sentencing policies, make it harder for prosecutors to charge criminals and encourages lighter sentences. Why are we handcuffing federal prosecutors from holding criminals accountable at such a dangerous time across the country? Sir?
I completely agree that we need to prioritize violent crime, and we are doing that. The memorandum that you're talking about says in several places, but particularly right at the beginning, the purpose is for us to be able to allocate our resources and focus them on combating violent crimes. So the sentence discretion that's being given to the prosecutors is aimed at using their resources against violent crime, and in no way calls for reductions in sentences with respect to violent crime. In every place in that memorandum, it explains that violent crime sentences are to be used to the extent needed to prevent dangers to the community. With respect to defunding the police, we are asking for more than $4.5 billion, $15.3 billion over 5 years for investments in state and local police. That includes a $2.4 billion increase in cops hiring just for FY24 alone, an increase of $20 million for our Project Safe Neighborhoods, an increase in $59 million for public safety officer benefit programs for the survivors of deceased officers, additional $884 million for new gun crime prevention strategies to be given to state and locals for recruitment, retention, and training. So with respect, there may be some people in the country calling for defunding the police, but it is not the Justice Department, and it is not President Biden, who made quite clear that he wants to increase the funding.
Well, I'm not focusing on defund the police, but I am focusing on all across the country, there's public revolt against prosecutors who are considering milder treatment of criminals. So the clear sentiment of the country is to tackle violent crime by making it tough on criminals. Do you agree with that or not?
No, I do agree with that, and our focus is on making it tough on violent criminals. That's where we are putting our resources. Those are the sentences we're asking our prosecutors to seek. those are the cases we're asking our prosecutors to bring.
Let me ask you about the immigration crisis. The department caseload, pending immigration caseload, stands at over 2.1 million and growing. According to TRAC, a nonpartisan nonprofit data research center that reports on U.S. immigration court statistics, since the start of the Biden administration, the growth in the backlog has been accelerating for the last 6 months, and yet the administration determined to repeal Title 42. The U.S. is on the verge of a deluge of new migrants if that occurs. The pending immigration case backlog is outrageous. According to TRAC, the nonpartisan group, since the start of the Biden administration, the growth of the backlog has been accelerating at a breakneck speed. 423,000 new cases in just the last 6 months. And yet, with this administration determined to repeal Title 42, the U.S. is on the verge of a deluge of new migrants. What do you say to that?
Well, you're right about the increase in the backlog. That's why we're asking for 965 new staff for the immigration courts, 150 new IJ teams, and that's why we're asking for an additional $367.1 million for a backlog reduction initiative to enable us to use new technologies, virtual courtrooms, dedicated dockets, et cetera. The Title 42 problem, Title 42 was an emergency authorization for the pandemic. The only question about whether Title 42 can be continued is if the pandemic is continuing. And it does not appear to be continuing. We already had one court that ordered the end to the Title 42 process because of the end of the pandemic. It's the same thing that's led to the reasons why mask mandates and all those other things have had to come down. So Title 42 is just a question of whether it's legally possible to continue using an emergency health provision that depended on the pandemic. Now, what the administration has to do instead are policies to be adopted by the Department of Homeland Security, which they've issued notice of proposed rulemaking to take place when Title 42 comes down. And those are the policies that DHS believes will substitute. But Title 42 it's just a question of once the pandemic is down, the grounds for using Title 42 fall away, the legal grounds.
Your budget includes $150 million to provide taxpayer-funded lawyers to individuals and families in immigration proceedings. $150 million could be better spent, in my judgment, shoring up the border in preparation for the termination of Title 42. We know that tax border policies incentivize illegal entry and help fuel the illicit activities of criminal organizations and the cartels in Mexico and the Northern Triangle countries as they profit off human trafficking. The impact the administration's border policies have had on smuggling, human trafficking, and other transnational organized crime. What are we doing to prepare for a potential wave of undocumented immigrants surging the border once Title 42 is ended, if it is?
So on the first question you asked about human smuggling, again, one of the first things I did when I came into the department was establish what we call Task Force Alpha, which is aimed at human smuggling, particularly from the Northern Triangle countries, exactly as you describe, and from Mexico. It is a task force of the Justice Department and the Department of Homeland Security and the U.S. Attorney's offices all across the southwest border. They have been identifying smuggling groups in the Northern Triangle countries in Mexico and have been prosecuting large numbers of those people. And yes, they're going to have to ramp up, and they are ramping up. We have money in the budget for additional money for that task force. My understanding of what Homeland Security has in mind to replace Title 42 is an authorized pathways program. As I understand it, people will have to present at the ports using this app called, I think it's called CBP One, to schedule appointments, or they have to make arrangements in their own countries. And if they cross otherwise, the presumption will be against them being eligible for asylum. I'm not sure I've gotten their entire program, but I believe that's the main elements of it.
Mr. Cartwright?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Well, Attorney General,